afternoon and welcome to the January 19th, 2022 City Council work session. Thank you for joining us in this remote meeting format we're using as our state and community continue to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic. This format enables the City Council to meet and take care of business while keeping everyone safe. For work sessions like this one, where there is no opportunity for public comment, those wishing to access the meeting can do so by watching the live stream available on our website, the broadcast on Comcast Channel 21, or by calling into one of the phone numbers listed for this meeting on the public webcast and meeting materials web page. Thank you again for joining us. And now with that introduction, we are about to go, I'm going to announce our transition into an executive session pursuant to ORS 192.660. The City Council will now meet in executive session to review and evaluate the job performance of a chief executive officer, other officers, employees, and staff. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are asked to leave the meeting. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on any of the deliberations during the executive session, except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. No decision may be made in executive session. At the end of the executive session, we will return to open session and welcome the audience back into the meeting. And so, councilors, this is now your prompt to log out of this public meeting and log back in on the other link for the executive session. And I'll see you in a minute. everyone to this public session now to an evaluation of Municipal Court Judge Gill. And because this is a council deliberation, I am again going to turn this over to Council President Syrett to preside over this discussion.
Thank you, Mayor. So this is a self-evaluation conversation with our Municipal Court Judge Gill. And I'm gonna start off by letting Judge Gill speak to anything in his self-evaluation that he might want to draw our attention to. And then we'll do a round robin amongst counselors. And then we will discuss a possible motion for a merit increase to the judge's annual salary. So Judge Gill, you've got a few minutes to set up some context if you like. You are still muted.
I'm pretty sure I did that last week when Sarah Caligari and I appeared. And I don't know if I said this before, but someone suggested that there would be a fund that we all have to put into. If you ever start speaking while you're on mute, you have to give to this fund. And after a very short amount of time, that could solve all the fiscal problems in the state of Oregon, should everybody pay into it. Councilor Syrett, thank you very much. And I appreciate you having me here today. And it's a second time in a short time. I know that the court administrator and I appeared last week for a municipal update, and I have tendered my self-evaluation, the informal evaluation, and there's a lot in there that is similar to what we reviewed at the municipal court update session. And so I'd rather turn it over to counselors for specific questions to be able to address that and have the time to address those questions. I do here in this forum want to make sure that I say thank you to a lot of the folks that really are a huge part of the municipal court and any successes or any ability for it to continue in the steadfast way that it has. First and foremost, the staff at the municipal court. I've said it before several times, and I'll never get tired of saying it like I've said before, that really the success and the ability for the court to have kept its doors open or to be operational through the beginning of this pandemic and even before this place really becomes a crucible at times in working through a lot of the issues that come through the court, and the court staff is to be commended. They work together on a lot of what comes through the door. They work together through a lot of the problems that we face both in court as well as outside of court, and some of the challenges that we see. They are integral in some of our relationships with other court partners and justice system partners. And if it but for their work and the integrity that they bring to the process, all on their backs, the municipal court would not be where it is right now today. And so a huge thank you to them, and in large part to the court supervisors, that court administration, Christy Ramey, Sarah Caligari, Lisa Baker, Sherry Coble, supervisors of the different court teams. Their knowledge, both historical as well as the knowledge of their trade, is really deep, and it brings a lot to the table. And I can work with any one of those folks, and I feel confident saying that any one of those folks will work with me, depending on what might be the issue du jour, whether it's small or really, really big. And then a special thank you to Sarah Caligari, who's the current acting court administrator. She stepped into the role after our last court administrator, Cheryl Stone, has left, and she picked up that mantle with no problem, and really continues to do wonderfully in a really hard, fast-moving job. And so Sarah Caligari is doing a great job. And I also wanted to make sure that I had a special thank you, shout out, if you will, to Cheryl Stone, who's the former court administrator. As I described in the past, a lot of what the court's been able to accomplish through the pandemic and before with the community court and other programs has been a lot due in part to Cheryl Stone's drive and her focus. And as I've described, I'm not sure I've met anybody quite as driven as Cheryl Stone. So were she here, I would say her thank you in person. I've done that many times in the past before she left. But in this particular setting, I think it's more than appropriate that I say thank you there. So the other folks that I've been working with the city have been extremely helpful in providing resources, knowledge, and been very available, which has been really important to me, as I described before, is getting my feet wet here in this position, as well as with the city. And so the Central Services Director, Mia Caligari, has been fabulous, always willing to take a phone call when I have questions. Catherine Brotherton has really helped through trying to get through some sticky issues here, and she's been a wonderful resource as well. It's been good getting to know Sarah Maderi, as well as Chief Skinner, and Christy Hammett, who was a former court administrator before my time, has been a wonderful resource and really wonderful to work with as well. And so I just wanted to say thank you to those folks, because being able to work with them has been integral to having a really healthy and functional municipal court. So with that, Councilor Surratt, I appreciate the minutes, and I want to make sure that we have lots of time for questions.
Great, thank you, Judge. So I'm going to do a round robin unless anyone objects. It might be a little bit different order from the last one since you've all moved around on the screen. So I'm going to start with Randy.
Thank you, President Surratt. Judge Gill, I am very impressed with the work that you've been doing. I think you did a tremendous job of adapting with you and your staff during kind of unprecedented times with the pandemic. And I think you do yeoman's work with a system that is all too short of capacity. I believe our criminal justice system is too short of capacity to be addressing a lot of the crime problems that we're seeing. I think our restorative justice system is also inadequate, as are our mental health and substance misuse treatment programs, which makes your job even more difficult. And I recognize that. I, for one, would like to see us be able to sit down and start from scratch of what would our system look like if we were to build a system that adequately serves our community. And I don't think the current system is robust enough to be doing that. And I think that's evidenced by what we see on the streets, crimes that fall below the level of circuit court and that fall clearly into the municipal court system. I just think we need more in order to protect our community. And I look forward to having those conversations with you, my colleagues, and the public, hopefully, as we move forward and try to build a more robust system. But thank you for everything that you do and everything that you bring to the table in your innovation and always seeking to improve the system. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Groves. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Randy. Alan.
Thank you, Councilor Surratt. One of my ways of helping me determine how well a department's functioning is whether or not I hear about them and through email or through community engagement, but I don't hear a lot about the court, which is a really good thing. That means that you're doing a good job. And especially during these trying and tough times where things have just gotten weird and bizarre, you've been able to not only carry forward, but also adapt and thrive. So I think the court's well run. I'm impressed with the work that you've done. Thanks to the whole court staff and the excellent job that they've been doing for the last 2 years during this pandemic. So I don't really have very many complaints. Nice job, Judge. Keep going. Thanks.
Sir, thank you.
Jennifer.
Thank you. So Judge Gill, as I said in the off session meeting, I think you're doing a fantastic job. You obviously are a good manager and you get the work done that the court needs to do, but you also have the kind of character that our community needs and wants. You're very committed to your profession. Obviously, you have extensive knowledge, but you're also always thinking about it and looking for new ways to do things better and reevaluating, which I find very impressive. You have this a commitment to fairness and equity and transparency that is very desirable for someone in your position. And you also care about people. Like whenever I've spoken to you, that's one of the things that really comes across is, no matter what people have done, you care about them and you want the best and fairest outcome for those people that end up in your courtroom. And I really appreciate that and everything you do. And I hope you will take back to your staff the excellent job they are doing in supporting you. I know you always say it's not just you, and I appreciate that you make those comments, and we want them to know they're doing a great job too.
I will pass it on for sure, Counselor. I appreciate that.
Emily.
Thank you. I don't have a lot to say, but there's been so many challenges that require innovative solutions and responses, and you've really stepped up and done that incredibly difficult time. And I appreciate that not only you had that reaction to what had to change very quickly, but you also look forward to our improvements. And as others have said, you're really on top of that. You do care about people, and that becomes very evident. So I'm pleased. And I also want to mention that I really appreciate your outlook and work for our mentally health challenged people. That's one of our biggest challenges and something that the city doesn't have a lot of control over that we can do other than giving money. And you are one spot of our government that does address that, and it's critical, and I really appreciate that. Thank you for your work.
Thank you, Councilor Semple. I appreciate that. And anytime we need to talk about any of those issues, please.
Mike.
Thank you, Claire. For the public's benefit, many people already know, but the council has only 3 employees. The only people we directly supervise are the city manager and everyone who works for her, and then the police auditor and everyone who works for her, and Judge Gill, our municipal court judge. And the municipal court judge has a bigger job than I think most people understand. And I think it's important to talk about that for a second. Your job isn't just to be in a municipal courtroom and administer justice. It's to run a municipal court like a department head would, with all the employees that are involved, all the contracts that are involved, all of the agreements, all of the physical structures for the work that gets done. And I agree very much with I agree with all my colleagues, and a couple of them most specifically. I agree about the nature of the system with Randy and what he said. But to Alan's point, during a fantastically difficult time to run a municipal court, we haven't heard any problems. And believe me, when people have complaints, they tend to write us. We tend to hear about it. And I've heard none. So my assumption based on my knowledge is everything is running very smoothly during a pandemic, during a nightmare scenario when people are incarcerated but can't be near one another, and everything that's involved. So to the process of running a municipal court, your major role and function, you've done a fantastic job. You've done an excellent job, an admirable one in difficult circumstances. And I really respect that quite a lot. I think that it's important also to say to Randy's point that you're not only doing it during the difficult process of a pandemic and everything that involves, but you're doing it within a larger system that isn't healthy, in my opinion. I had the privilege in previous years to have long conversations with former district attorneys like Doug Harkleroad and Alex Gardner. And in both of those circumstances, I remember specifically during jail, bond, and levy kind of campaigns, talking with them about what a jail system should look like as a backstop for a just court system. And one of the things I'll never forget they told me was that a county west of the Mississippi, west of the Rockies, the average is to have 1 jail bed for every 300 to 350 people in the county available in order for it to work effectively. So doing that math, we need about 1,100 beds in the Lane County. We have less than 300 at the county. We have 100 at Springfield. We rent some of each. That is nowhere near sufficient. So good on you for doing a job with an insufficient backstop. Thank you.
Councilor Clark, thank you.
Judge, I see the automated lights in your office have gone out on you, so feel free to wave your hand to
Thank you.
get that gone.
I'm not sure I can get it to go on. Sometimes
All
it
right.
goes on, sometimes it goes off.
I know that
You'll
happens
see
to
me,
city
right?
managers
Oh, there we go.
sometimes.
Thank you.
So yeah, Matt's up next, and then I'm gonna let Mayor Venus speak as well, even though technically the judge is not one of her employees, but she asked to be in the queue. So Matt, you're up.
Thank you, President Syrat. Judge Gill, you are a gem. I appreciate your service to the community and your dedication to fairness and integrity, compassion, and justice. And I thank you for making the time to meet with me over the past few months, touring the municipal court in person and meeting for coffee in person. And I suspect you would agree that a lot more can be gleaned in the three-dimensional real life space than in the two-dimensional space. And yet I also recognize that the court has advanced the virtual docket to, in your words, or in your words, it was the silver lining of the court's closings in 2020 and 2021. And the virtual appearances have allowed for a consistent stream of cases and other court matters to be heard when in-person appearances have been frustrated by backlogs and COVID-19 exposure and other significant real life reasons. Judge, if it's your intention to continue the virtual access to the court and lowering barriers, in your, as you put it, to access for persons involved in the municipal justice system, what guardrails are in place to ensure that folks participating in the two-dimensional space are receiving justice, whether in whatever format, whether they're in a hearing setting, they're participating virtually from the jail. I recognize that it has allowed the court to expedite or to actually hear cases in an expeditious manner. But what guardrails are in place, or what guardrails should be in place, in your opinion, to ensure justice for those who are participating virtually?
All right, Councilor Keating, it is a really, really good question. And I'm going to be extraordinarily candid here. Before the pandemic, which is a phrase I'm sure everybody either uses or hears on a daily basis, but the same holds true here. And folks that I've worked with in this capacity will be the first to tell you that I was adamantly opposed to anything really regarding a video appearance before the necessity arose. There was a push to do in-custody arraignments by video from a bunch of different sources. And there were folks, not so much, but talking about having telephonic appearances and maybe someone else being able to appear by video on out-of-custody settings. With the advent of the pandemic, right, we fall into the cliche. It's really not a cliche. It's an adage that, you know, mother is the, or necessity is the mother of invention. And so that was a point where there was just simply no choice, right? You have to relieve some pressure in some places. And if you have a way to uphold due process in any which way you can, you got to do it. That coupled with the constraints put on the entire justice system and some of the other partners really kind of formed what the landscape was going to potentially look like. And all you could really do is make the best of what you had. And so we come to a fork really in the kinds of, so segue into, the court started looking into virtual appearances to allow folks to appear where it's appropriate that they would appear virtually, at least nothing else to have their matter heard. It may be not resolve right away, maybe not do anything material, but to at least have that flow continue, no matter how much of a trickle. The other side is the in-custody side for those folks who are in jail, specifically at the Lane County Jail. When the pandemic first hit, we as a municipal court would still go down to the jail to hold our in-custody sessions where we were having them before. If you haven't been down to the jail, at the jail, there's a courtroom, an actual courtroom. It's not huge. It's not really nice. There's a lot of open space, and there's a bench and some computers for staff, and that's about it. And there are plastic chairs for folks to sit in. And the court would always go down there and have the in custody docket down there. We continue to do that, or try to do that, when the pandemic first started. But because people were not allowed to, there wasn't as much movement allowed in the jail as before. People were basically being held put to prevent the spread of anything that might be in there, as well as having the capacity of the jail being dramatically reduced. We actually, as members of the court, the judge, the attorneys who were involved, the prosecution, as well as the defense attorneys, the court clerk, and a bailiff would actually travel around the jail to the different areas, right? We had the one courtroom where they could bring up just a couple of folks at a time, a small number, and they would try to get those folks through. And then we would go in to see folks in the holding cells. And then we would go to the different annexes, the East Annex, the North Annex, the different pods within those annexes that are out there. And then we would go to the segregation and the medical facility. We would go to the intake area where folks before were going through the intake process, but then were converted to actual holding cells, folks who were actually being observed for potential exposure and infection of the virus, or those folks who were actually in quarantine for one reason or another. So we would go all over the jail, and it was an extraordinarily slow and kind of an ineffective process, just because of all of the logistics that were involved. And so the jail, through the circuit court primarily, because that's their jail, the Lane County Jail, went and implemented a video system. And we were right there with them as they were developing that. And so then the jail went to it being mandatory that these appearances become virtual and folks don't come in and out of the jail from a safety perspective, just to reduce the number of actual people that are going in and out of the jail itself and where they're going and wandering around the jail. And you have to remember, this is back in April, I think, of 2020. And so we really didn't know a whole lot about the virus and what it was doing, how it was spreading. I mean, there was still the big arguments on the kind of masks, whether masks were relevant in prevention and all those kinds of things. And there was no guidance from CDC really. And so that was the landscape that we ended up putting these dockets together. And the jail up till this point hasn't gone back from doing these appearances virtual and not letting people in or out, other than those folks who are taken into custody for one reason or another. So we have a virtual docket set for those folks who are in custody because that is the access that we have to the jail. And I think the Springfield jail is similar. We don't have the ability to do video over there. Those folks are still transported to our court, but they do remote hearings for all of their folks over in Springfield. And so that's one virtual docket that we have, and that's by necessity, and that's more or less kind of dictated as to how that kind of access is what's going to be allowed. They're not going to put a whole bunch of people in the courtroom like they did before at the jail. The other one is the virtual court setting that we had for those folks who are out of custody. The majority of those people appear with attorneys. And so it is by request of the defendant always that they appear virtually. So they are choosing to do that. And so that goes directly to your question about due process and is it just that they appear virtually? And it really is their request to appear virtually. And the reasons that have come across the bench to determine whether it's going to be an appropriate appearance or not, and not always, but generally to weigh heavily in favor of continuing the virtual docket by request of the defendant with an appearance requested by the defendant, are all the things that go along with why someone may not want to actually or could actually physically appear in the courthouse. Some are purely logistical. We've had folks who appear from their workplace with their attorney, sometimes without an attorney if it's another matter, simply because they can't take time off of work to go to the courthouse to make the appearance. They're at risk of losing their job or not getting paid. And in a time, especially during a time of pandemic, that was kind of a no-brainer for me. If someone can take care of their court matter, it's a fairly low-level matter, then I'm going to allow that. I'm not going to be the barrier to having their matter resolved. I think that is antithetical to having access to justice, that prevention of a finality piece of their case. Another example would be someone doesn't have a driver's license, and the only way that they can get to the court is by driving, whether it's a rural area outside of town or it's an area in town, may or may not be served by the bus, and the bus may or may not be able to get them here in a timely way and take them away from other real life responsibilities, whether it's childcare or other matters that they just can't get here. So if they, instead of giving them a Hobson's choice of either failing to appear, dealing with the consequences of that, or driving without a license, whether it be on the violation level or the felony level, I don't want, if I can prevent that or be a solution to that, then I think the court's role is to make sure that that is available to the person to appear. Again, the majority of those folks who are appearing on a misdemeanor level are going to have an attorney, so they'll have representation with them at that virtual appearance. Other real considerations are folks who, we have a lot of folks who really don't want to come and physically be at a courthouse because they may be taken into custody because of their immigration status or other reasons that physical appearance might be really difficult. And so if this virtual docket exists and the court has the ability to listen, hear, and adjudicate in a fair way, then that virtual process, in my opinion, stays. I think it would be a real tragedy to take that resource away. The idea of trying to put governors on this to make sure that justice isn't left behind, right? It's a just and fair environment, is really, I think, remedied by the fact that, number one, for most criminal matters, there's an attorney that appears with them. Number two, if someone appears on a criminal matter without an attorney, they've either waived their right to an attorney, and so they're making decisions for themselves, or they're doing something like addressing a warrant, or they're out of state and they really can't physically appear. And in that case, the ability to have their matter addressed quickly by a judge in this remote setting does a world of good. Not only is it fair to the defendant, but honestly, it allows the court to keep that matter open and moving forward and really be able to focus on those other matters that need to be in person. So the virtual appearance by someone who's in custody at the jail, we rely heavily on attorneys. We have a lot of folks who are involved in the jail, Lane County Behavioral Health and some other people, to where we can get as much information as possible to take it from being something where someone just appears as a face, as opposed to really staffing and understanding the dynamics of any one particular case or defendant that comes before the court at the in-custody setting. And again, that's what we have. We're not able to go into the jail for safety reasons, and the county's made that clear. With the out-of-custody folks, it's just so far proven itself to be such a dynamic and helpful docket that I don't get the sense at all at any point that that due process isn't being served or it's an unfair in any way. So that was a long answer to your question. I hope that it somewhat addressed the concerns. But I've said it before and I'll always say it. Please reach out to me. I'm more than happy to continue the discussions. Things that I've said may be raising additional questions, as I suppose it should. And I'm always up to talk through any of those questions or concerns as they come up.
Judge, I appreciate your thoughtful response, and with an eye for justice, you have navigated changing times with aplomb. Thank you, Judge Gill, for your service.
Thank you, sir.
So I see Councilor Evans, Greg has joined us, and Greg, we just finished a round robin of folks offering Judge Gill response to his self-eval or your own evaluation of his performance this last year. So it's your turn if you're prepared.
Well, yes and no, but I just want to go back to when I signed on to this meeting a few minutes ago and ask a couple of questions of Judge Gill. I think that you've done an outstanding performance. Since you were appointed, since we appointed you several years ago. You have made the court much more accessible and workable for people who have, had to engage you guys for violations, whether they be low-level misdemeanors or higher-level misdemeanors. I think that you've done an excellent job. But going back to this virtual appearance piece, my question is this: would it be better if we had some kind of ordinance in place that gave specific direction about how virtual matters are handled? And this may have already been asked. But I see where there could be some places where we have holes in the game.
I understand. I appreciate the question, Councilor Evans. I think more discussion about what those holes might be or what the concerns might be would be really important. I will tell you that there are policies and court rules in place that address a lot of what may be of a concern. I will tell you that there's really nothing about the virtual appearance docket that is willy-nilly. There was a push to do things telephonically, a lot telephonically, and that was unacceptable to me without a lot of the correct motion work that's in place. With the virtual, where electronic transmission is allowable, a lot of the ORS already addresses what may be a question of yours, allowing it in circumstances and other instances. And so sitting down and going through what's already allowed by statute, if there are other prescriptions involved with how that goes down, what's in the court rules, and then generally what the court policy is, that may address a lot of the concerns or questions that you might have. And so a follow-up, I think, would probably be a really good idea on your question, if that's acceptable to you, Counselor.
Yeah, if something happened like this, you don't know what I am behind this image that's on the screen here. Anybody can hop in there and represent a defendant, a client, and you have no knowledge of it. Is that something that ORS rules cover at this point?
Again, a good question, good example. But I would tell you that if you put on the screen and I can't see your face, I don't consider it an appearance. And I've had matters continue, I've said it over, and I haven't accepted the appearance as an appearance for folks when, and a lot of times it's through no fault of their own. A lot of folks don't have the ability, let me rephrase that, don't have the experience to be able to pop in and attend a Zoom session like a lot of us do. And so navigating both the audio piece and the video piece from whatever device they might be appearing from, whether it's anything from a PC or a Big Mac down to their phone or a tablet, it's a different view for each. And so if someone can't get their video to work, I will tell them point blank, I understand that this is frustrating and that you want to resolve your case and you've worked with your attorney and you've asked for this appearance, but if we can't get the video to work, then we're not going to be able to proceed with your matter. If you don't have the ability to do that, I'm very sorry. Maybe we can figure something else out, but the default is going to be a personal appearance. And so we'll work forward that way. But if I see SpongeBob and I don't see the person who's signed up to be here, who's asked to be here, we're not going to proceed with the case. To further address the question, the vast majority of appearances that we have are made by attorneys who represent a defendant. And the attorneys that we usually work with are familiar to me and familiar to the judges that we have on the bench. Every single judge that works here has worked around here long enough to be able to recognize most folks, whether they're indigent defense contracted with the city, or whether it's another private attorney who does criminal defense. It's a pretty small community. I think the pandemic has probably made it a little bit smaller. And so anybody that's represented by one of these attorneys, if they say the client is who they say they are, it would be no different than appearing in court and saying, yeah, this is the person whose case you called. And I'm more than comfortable moving forward with those folks as officers of the court. When it, if someone appears on a warrant and says, yeah, I'm Jane Doe, I want to have that recalled and want to do certain things. Again, you're not going to have absolute certainty, but usually it's the defendant that reaches out and asks the court for that appearance. And usually it's to some benefit of the defendant. And if there's a red flag or something amiss out there, we're usually fairly quick to call it out as being something that just doesn't seem right. That last part isn't necessarily fail-proof. Obviously, it's not solid. But in reality, it's not really any different than someone checks in that says, I'm Jane Doe, I want to see the judge. That person comes in and sees the judge to have something happen with their case. But those are a minority, vast minority of the kind of work that's done virtually. So,
one last thing around that. Do we have the capacity to engage multiple platforms? So say someone doesn't have Zoom, they have Skype, or they have Microsoft Teams, or they have some other kind of miscellaneous communications platform. Is the court ready and equipped to handle that?
So the design system right now is that the court system uses is Zoom. And anybody who has the ability to appear electronically or virtually should be able to use Zoom. And these are the first criteria that we go through. I'm not sure I've heard of anybody being denied the ability to appear virtually because they weren't able to get Zoom. I'm sure it exists. But if you have any sort of program on your computer, you can open up into a Zoom session and use it on the web without, I think, having to have it download. I might be wrong on that, but I think you can, if you are invited. It may not work as well, but you can still appear by Zoom. But that's a good segue into something that I think is really exciting. So the city's been working on, and I can't take any credit for this, working with our current case management system, which is by Tyler Technologies. Big company, also has the system over in Circuit Court. But the real bend right now is to try to have virtuals go through that system. It's supposed to be pretty accessible. And so any downfalls with Zoom in terms of accessibility, my hope is that it would be remedied by the potential to use Tyler. We'll wait to find out to see if that's a go or actually going to be a go and how effective it will ultimately be. But from everything that I've heard so far, it's pretty exciting. Again, going from here, trying to lower the barrier and making it more accessible to more folks. I hope it happens, but it's in the works, so I can't say. But that's the direction that I think the court is going, just because this has been working so very well.
Sounds good to me.
Councilor Evans, thank you very much.
Yes.
All right, I'm gonna let Mayor Venice speak before I make my comments.
Thank you. I appreciate you giving me time and recognize time is short. I wanted my opportunity in a public session also to thank you for the work that you do and the way you would lead the way in this community and for other communities with the way you approach your work. And what we're hearing from you and this really extraordinary self-evaluation that you submitted to us is your capacity to actually target your limited resources, to be responsive to emerging needs as you see them, and to be extraordinarily respectful and humane, really, in their treatment of people who are coming through your system. And I just want to plant this seed for council. Council has been talking about accountability and what does accountability look like and how do we measure success, and that actually the information that you have, Judge Gill, through your work and your umbrella of services and the way you respond is kind of a leading edge of information for us around how you most appropriately use resources and target and provide support to people who need supports, have a smooth justice process for people who really need to go through a criminal justice system. So I'm just planting that seed with council that as we talk about how do we measure accountability, that Judge Gill's experience and background might be extraordinarily helpful to us in terms of understanding the resources and how they work. So thank you very, very much for the work you do and for the way you point the way to us to really think about how we provide really appropriate targeted justice system. Thank you.
Mayor, thank you very much. I'm just absolutely honored to be a part of this.
Judge Gill, I just want to say I so appreciate the extraordinary level of dedication and care with which you have carried out your role as our municipal court judge. I really appreciate Councilor Clark kind of giving us a more expansive idea of what all is involved or part of what's involved in what you do as our municipal court Chief Justice. And I think you've done an excellent job. I'm very grateful that you are part of the team of folks who are working to administer justice in our city for us in the way that you do, in the very thoughtful way that you do, both thoughtful of your staff and as well as those who come before you. And I think, again, we're lucky to have you here.
Councilor, I appreciate those words very much.
You're welcome. So now we have an opportunity as council to provide Judge Gill with a merit increase. And if you didn't have a chance to look at the agenda packet, and Catherine, if I garble this, please correct me. So the way the judge's contract is laid out, there's a informal self-eval to the council annually, and then an informal evaluation submitted to council every 2 years, and then a formal evaluation every 4 years. And then COVID has kind of messed up that timeline a little bit. So there's no provision, explicit provision in the contract to provide a merit increase during the year of the self-evaluation. So staff has provided us with some information about other merit-based increases that were provided to non-represented employee groups this year, which was 3.2%. And we could consider awarding Judge Gill that same merit increase, and then also look to make some amendments to our employment contract so we don't kind of end up in this lack of continuity in terms of how the self-evaluation and the potential merit increases occur. So there's a possible motion in our agenda packet, and I would seek someone to put a motion on the table if someone is so inclined.
Point of clarification, President Syret.
Yes.
You said it was a 3.2% increase. Is that what, am I hearing that right?
That is correct.
Okay, great. Does that match the percentage? Another point of clarification. You said that that's matches the percentage of merit increase for non-represented employees. What was the percentage of increase for represented employees?
Well, so there was a market rate adjustment that was provided to both represented and non-represented employees, and I don't know what those were. The 3.2 is the merit-based pay adjustment, and I don't know if represented employee groups were offered one or not.
Okay, Counselor, if I may, move to give Judge Gill a 3.2% merit increase to his annual salary and authorize the council president to negotiate and execute an amendment to his employment contract, allowing for discretionary salary adjustments for the years that he is not formally evaluated by the council, and deleting the reference to an October evaluation date.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Any discussion of this motion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It passes unanimously. All right, and thank you, Judge, so much. Thank you, colleagues, and Mayor Vinis, I'll turn it back to you to close this out.
Thank you all. Thank you, Counselor Surratt, for presiding so beautifully over that. Thank you, Judge Gill, for your robust responses, very informative. We look forward to keeping in touch with you in the future. Thank you so very much. And with that, we are adjourned.